I'm Mark Baer. You're watching the YourTown television program. My guest, Michael Green, Monterey State Historic Park.
Well done.
And you are the interpretive program manager.
Right.
So what does that mean?
So that means my job is to coordinate the interpretive programs at the park that include the school programs, the volunteer program, and the tours that go on in various adobes.
And so let's, right now what's coming up is Christmas in the Adobes.
Yeah,
and let's go into what it is and how it works and the background of this.
Yeah, probably the most fun I have all year, and certainly the largest workload I have during the year, is to coordinate this two-night event. This year it's on December 8th and 9th from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. And we provide an opportunity for families to get together and have a very special evening in downtown Monterey. We have 23 historic sites that are going to be open, most of them adobes, that are going to be decorated for the holidays at night. And each adobe offers a different theme, a different entertainment, sometimes refreshments, cookies and punch and hot chocolates and things like that. So you travel from house to house and you see what each house has to offer. There's usually a volunteer there to tell you something about the history of that building, or in a certain theme that goes along with the history of the building. For instance, at Robert Louis Stevenson House, we'll have a bagpipe player there. And at Custom House, we'll have fandango dancers, or a guitar player in another house playing Spanish guitar. At Casa Gutierrez, we have flamenco. So it's really a special evening, and you just kind of wander from house to house. You get a map, you go with your family, and you move through the neighborhood, and you just visit all these houses.
How many years has this been going on?
We're in our 34th year.
Wow, because I know it's been here ever since I've been here, and it's just a magical thing. Yeah. And as we were saying before we started, the adobes are all well and good, but they don't mean anything unless we're really using them.
That's true. That's true.
And to use them, it takes volunteers.
I like to think that I have the best job in the world because I spend time with people who are willing to give their most precious resource. That's their time. We are constantly reminded, day to day, bombarded with information about how people are doing bad things to one another. And in this environment, I get to be with these special people. And it's not only our volunteers, but it's our nonprofit cooperating association. It's the various stakeholders in the town that support this event. Now, of the 23 special sites we have, only 7 of them belong to California State Parks. The rest come from the community, people that want to open up their adobes to support our cause. This fundraiser is pretty darn important. And this is, I think, the whole point of the event. Not only is it a great family evening, but the funds that are raised, the revenue we raise from this, go to support our programs to bring kids to our school programs. There used to be a time when you and I were in school. A school program was something you look forward to. It was almost taken for granted. You get to go on a field trip, right?
Field trip, right?
Yeah. Well, now we're in a position, or the schools are in a position where they can't necessarily afford to send kids to these programs. We have busloads of kids that come from East County that have never seen the ocean, and they come to Monterey for the first time because we can offer that school a transportation scholarship with the funds that we raise through Christmas in the Adobes.
Let's talk about MSHPA.
Monterey State Historic Park Association. That is our registered 501c3 nonprofit, and they are a community support group. By special legislation, the governor of California gave the community support groups the legal right to raise revenue for a specific park, and then that revenue stays within the boundaries of that park. So this is a very dedicated group of people. They have a board of directors. They're very much involved in what's going on in the park and helping us do all sorts of programs, not only these school scholarship programs I just described, but also helping support staffing, materials that we use during the school programs. So we couldn't operate without them, especially in a very low budget environment. So they really help out.
And so how do people get involved with this?
Well, you can go to their website. They have, it's very easy to remember. It's the Monterey State Historic Park Association. So you just take the initials, mshpa.org. You go to that website and you can learn all about them. And you can also buy your Christmas in the Adobes tickets on that website too.
So now, since I haven't seen you for a while, what's going on with Cooper Malera?
Oh, wow, that's pretty exciting. As you know...
And you better tell the audience exactly what that is, because we know, but they might not know.
Well, the Cooper Malera adobe was built in the 1830s by Captain John Rogers Cooper. He marries Encarnacion Vallejo. They raised their family there. This is early California, mid-19th century stuff. And it's really a remarkable complex of structures. And it has remained, as an historic landmark and a designated historic site. It was donated by the granddaughter of Captain Cooper to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and the California State Parks operated it in a stewardship capacity. Our stewardship and operating agreement came to an end in 2016, so the National Trust determined that they wanted to reassume stewardship in a very active way that would be relevant to the community, just what we were talking about earlier. And so they proposed several ideas about how we could have an adaptive reuse for that property. How could we make this more relevant? And so their initial proposals were quite ambitious and really without fully interacting with the community to find out what we needed. So the community approached them and said, listen, we want to talk to you about what we want. And a series of consultations and meetings and so on went down, and finally they came up with a program that I think, and a lot of people think, is quite exciting. So they're going to be rehabilitating the barns. There are 2 barns on the property there. That's in progress now. You can drive down Polk Street and see it going on. They'll be putting a bakery in the corner, what was our corner store. They're going to leave the main adobe intact and have tours going on, volunteers doing tours there. And what was the Spear Warehouse, which was on the property in the garden, will be a quaint cafe with outdoor seating. And all of this, and some re-landscaping in the garden as well. As far as I know, they're going to be saving the orchards that are there. It was always a very peaceful spot for you to spend some time, take your lunch, have an afternoon on the property. But this will actually make the property even more accessible.
Well, I like that the public-private relationship.
Yeah.
I like... purists don't like these kind of solutions, but these are the kind of only realistic solutions that are available to us now to save this history.
Well, I think that's true, and I think even
and plus I think it makes things better.
I think the hardcore purists still appreciate what's going on here. For one thing, that barn, those 2 barns were never really used all that much, and they were structurally unsound. And so these improvements to those barns are going to be really terrific for the community. For one thing, they can be used as entertainment venues, wedding venues. You can imagine a concert in the barn or a wedding in the barn or a lecture or something. And so it'll have much more use and relevance to the community. And it'll still look like a 19th century barn.
So just on a personal level, you're quite an accomplished historian. Why does local history matter so much? What does it bring to a community?
Well, that's a very good question because, I did not like history in school. I was one of those kids, that preferred to do athletics, and I was a drama kid. I went through music and drama and liberal arts and so on, and history was something I thought was just dates and names. And I think as I got into this job at State Parks 28 years ago, I began to understand that to really understand where you're going, you have to know where you've been. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but in order to apply the lessons of the past to what's going on in the present into the future, it gives you a great advantage, an understanding of your ancestors, an appreciation of what they've done and what they've been through. We're constantly being bombarded by stories that have their connections to the past, things that went on 100 years ago. Affect us today. And if you don't know what that was that went on, you don't even know why you're affected. So it's hard to put into words, but I really think that an appreciation of what went before will lead you into the right path in the future.
So you started learning as you got into the job.
Yeah, into state parks. I started as a guide at Hearst Castle. And at the time, I actually took the job on a dare because I had some public speaking abilities. And my wife says, you ought to apply for this job. It'll be fun. I thought, well, okay, this is another roadside attraction kind of thing, and I'll do the tours. I'll memorize the inventory and that sort of thing. And I got tapped on the shoulder by a supervisor who said, you really ought to get into training and take this a little more seriously and become one of our instructors. So that kind of led me into this life that doors were open that I didn't even know existed.
So that's so interesting. See, I've known you for a long time, and I didn't know that you had the dramatic training.
Yeah.
Because now I can see it in your storytelling ability.
Oh, well.
And the ability to tell a story. I mean, what is history but our collected stories?
It's funny, I actually teach a unit on storytelling for the State Park Rangers in the Academy.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
And in fact, I think one of my proudest accomplishments in parks is that since 1994, I've been an instructor in the Ranger Academy, and every one of those rangers who's done a campfire program or a nature walk or a tide pool talk has had to listen to my unit in the training. Yeah.
Oh, that's fabulous. Well, because you don't see what's going on around. The past lives if you can tell the story of the past.
That's right.
And it's invisible and it's meaningless if the story isn't there.
And if I'm giving a tour, I'll say at the very beginning of that tour that I'm not going to be giving you a lecture on history.
Yeah.
I'm going to be telling you the stories of the people who lived here. And as soon as you say that, you see people, light up, their eyes get brighter. They want to hear stories about other human beings because that's how we relate to one another.
And you've always had, your enthusiasm is always come through because it seems like you're excited about it.
Well, I am, and
yeah.
I'm glad it does because
Yeah.
I think that we are, we kind of, when we communicate nonverbally with our face, our bodies, our eyes, these are the things that people pick up on, and that enthusiasm is carried through the story, and that, I think, it's contagious. We infect one another with this enthusiasm.
And the preservation of history doesn't happen, and especially in a place like Monterey, where we have these historic sites and we have the adobes, and we are so much a part of the state history. Preservation doesn't happen automatically. Preservation's a mindset.
That's true, and I can tell you a few examples in our park of buildings that were scheduled for demolition during urban renewal, but because of very concerned citizens, former owners, people who had done business in these buildings that understood their value, they would get together with other entities to form a coalition against the destruction of a building like that. California's first brick house is a good example, or the old whaling station. Both state park properties were preserved by the efforts of a woman who owned a business in the first brick, and the Junior League of Monterey and California State Parks that came together and had those structures named historic landmarks, and they were protected. So it's kind of funny when you walk through this very business park and you see this really what amounts to is a suite of office buildings, and right in the middle of that there are these two 19th century structures that have been saved.
And it's just from a practical city creating value. Mm-hmm. It's so nice. It adds so much.
Yeah.
It gives sense of place.
Yes, indeed.
And is so important. And if you don't have the historic monuments, if you don't have the history, you don't have place.
And we have a lot to be proud of here. I
Yeah.
mean, when one of those cruise ships pulls into the harbor and these people get off that boat and they look around and they can see, these really interesting aspects of North American history. Really, North American, not just California history, but the west side of North America, it's got a rich, rich history. And they're interested in that. I'm struck by how many people who live in this county and have done so for years, they go on one of our tours and say, I had no idea that Monterey was so rich in history. There's so many first things that happened in California that happened first in Monterey. So it's a lot of fun to tell the stories here.
Yeah, and it just has value. It is worth preserving, and it doesn't happen automatically. A lot of people are involved in making, in preserving our past and seeing the value of passing it down.
Yeah, and it's very important that we teach this to children when they're young. Kids are the most impressionable at a certain age. That's why we teach California history in the 4th and 5th grade. Now, what you learn in 4th grade California history is not going to be what you learn at a college level. It's going to be simplified, but I'm one of the things that I'm struck by in Monterey is how many people that are not culturally or ethnically connected to California history are telling that story. And so I'm trying to draw people in from the culture, especially from Latino culture, to understand that the Custom House is a shared history, not only with the merchants who came in and brought goods and trade goods to California and brought in their language and their music and their food, but it's also a shared history with the people who are here, the descendants of the Californios, the descendants of the American Indians who are here. This is a shared history. It's not just for one culture to tell to another. So I'm doing my best to get more people, especially East County kids, to come in and understand that this belongs to them too.
And I love again, I've always felt the past and the present and the future all live at once in a historical stream. And I love the Italian fishing stories here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
And I love the story of the sardine fishing. And now I love how that has cycled into marine preservation.
That's right.
So history, one thing progresses into another thing, and it's all goes back to the same, older stories. It's fascinating. I'm sure you're learning new stuff all the time.
Oh, and the expansion of the field. As I alluded to earlier, we're talking about learning history in school as names and dates and battles and presidents and things like that. But there's really been a strong movement in the teaching and the learning of history toward, the everyday person's experience, right? Public history, what it was like for the ordinary fella. And when I teach in my classes, I teach about where were you when a certain event happened, right? And almost everybody can say where they were on a certain significant date. But I'll say, okay, what about the last football game or the Super Bowl? Where were you at that time? Well, they were sitting in my living room with my friends and having chips and salsa and that kind of thing. So it's about relevance. It's about what your perspective is.
Well, we could go on. I'm Mark Baer. You're watching YourTown Television. I'm with Michael Green, Monterey State Historic Parks. And again, Christmas at the Adobes. And any last shout out that you want to make?
Well, just make it December 8th and 9th to see this wonderful family event. Buy your tickets online at mshpa.org, and I hope to see you there.
I think we got it all in. Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.